I'm a small family farmer and I'm married to a historian. So a question we get asked all the time is, how did U.S. farming become conservative? And on the inside, I'm always thinking, become? What do you mean, how did it become conservative? But that's never what people really mean when they ask that question. What people mean is, what happened to all those progressive farmers from back in the day? Because there was a time when the U.S. had a lot of small farmers who wanted progressive political change. They didn't just talk about how the banks and monopolies were out to get them, they actually voted about it. They voted for progressive leaders who fought monopolies and tycoons on behalf of ordinary people. And we still have some of their legacy in our politics today, like Minnesota's Democratic Farmer Labor Party and North Dakota's Democratic Nonpartisan League Party. So we have the legend and the memory of these progressive farmers and how there used to be so many of them, and these family farms and progressive small farmers just disappeared into the mists of time, and no one really knows how, or so the story goes. Let me tell you the current situation of why farming is conservative, and then I'll tell you how we got here. And to do that, content warning, we're going to have to unpack a lot of deep and sticky feelings and assumptions about farming, politics, wealth. We're skipping the small talk and getting right into it. Stick with me, these can be hard things to talk about, but it's going to explain so much about why our politics look the way they do right now. The reality is, progressive farmers, their disappearance is not a mystery. We know exactly what happened to them. Farmers who were progressive tended to be poor. They also tended to be first-generation farmers who had to build their own wealth themselves. But at the same time, in this country were a lot of wealthier farmers. Farmers who started out life with generational wealth, who inherited the land and or the money that they were farming with. And those wealthier farmers tended to be pretty conservative, even at the height of this progressive era. That progressive era just happened to be a time when there were a lot of first-generation farmers without a whole lot of inherited wealth to fall back on, who were having progressive goals, thoughts, and ideas. But of course, anytime there was financial trouble, it was the wealthiest farmers who were best at weathering it, not the poor farmers. So when you have that dynamic, the poorest, most progressive people in the group getting filtered out, what's going to happen over time? It's going to get more conservative, because poor people need to worry about getting paid enough for their time and labor, and they want a government that keeps employers and big businesses from cheating people. That's a lot of what progressivism is about. But heirs worry about returns on capital. They're worried about income from all that land and wealth that they own. So they want a government that is going to keep labor costs low. It's going to let employers cheat employees. And they don't want to pay taxes. That's how agriculture got conservative. It runs on inherited wealth now. And heirs and nepo babies just tend to run conservative. The filtering out of poor farmers in the U.S. has been so effective and so thorough that most small family farmers in the United States today are millionaires with a six-figure income. In today's United States, saving family farmers is not about poverty relief. It's just about making sure that people with inherited land and wealth get to keep it, whether or not they're actually good at the job of farming. And let's face it, free money for incompetent heirs is very much in line with what conservative politics actually means in today's United States. Our conservative movement is certainly not about traditional values like thrift, modesty, chastity, telling the truth, or protecting the innocent. These were never really in fashion for powerful people anyway. This conservative just means conservative as in the wealthy get to conserve their wealth. And that's why the U.S. farm sector is conservative. That's what running a whole sector on inheritance gets you. And get this, a whole lot of people in rural America already know it too. I've had farm contractors who work for very wealthy families with lots of land tell me, when no one else is around, we have got to have an estate tax to break up the estates that they work for. Because if we don't, it is all over for that rural economy. A whole lot of people in rural America know the emperor has no clothes. But if you're the guy who says it, bye-bye employment. And I think this is one of the biggest unsolved puzzles in American politics right now. There's a lot of resentment in rural areas against these wealthy landowners, against these large farm families. And because no one is willing to say it, it goes unsolved. And the resentment goes unsolved, and people get angrier and angrier. And the people they need to be mad at are the local gentry, the local aristocrats, the local big landowners. But no one has the guts to say it out loud. And I'll hear a lot of resentment about politicians not coming out and talking about this. But ask yourself this: how are politicians supposed to champion a cause that nobody else is talking about either? You know? And that makes this the biggest unsolved problem in American politics today. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression. By the way, if you like this video, if you feel like you're learning something, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe, a comment. These really do help the video get out in front of more people and spread the word. And if you really like it, there's a Patreon down below. Either way, thanks so much for watching, and feel free to share with anyone who might be interested. One of the biggest benefits of having worked in agriculture for 28 years is I got to see hundreds of farms with my own eyes, got to know the farmers and the employees and the contractors who keep those farms moving. I also met some really cool farmers, learned a lot from them, and some of the best farmers I ever met were first generation. They were on the ball because they had to be. They didn't have mommy and daddy's laurels to fall back on. And because these first generation farmers have to actually engage with the world around them to make a living, they can't just hole up in their wealth bunker. They tend to be a lot more politically moderate. I learned through personal experience that the more of a right-wing loudmouth a farmer is, the worse their farm is. Every single time, it is a one-to-one correlation because they're into reactionary politics as a way to cope, to blame other people for their problems. And boy, do they have a lot of them because they are in way over their heads. So a lot of people are really scared of offending farmers, of saying anything that they feel like an angry right-wing farmer might yell at them for, because I guess people think that angry right-wing farmers must be the pure authentic soul of America or something. So if they're mad at you, then you must have said something really, really wrong. But actually working in agriculture, getting to know these folks, seeing their operations, seeing how they treat their employees, and even too often their own family members, has relieved me of any feelings that if they don't like me, I must have done something wrong. They're loud and they're wealthy, but that's it. That is really different from actually being an authority on farming or life or anything else. So let's take it back to first generation farmers. Out of the 300 or so family farms that I worked with that were mainstream commercial scale operations, you want to guess how many of them were those first generation badasses who really had the chops to build something themselves? Out of 300, it was 2. And if you talk to first generation farmers about why there are so few of us and what the number one obstacle is, it's not corporations, it's getting land, because all of the farmland is already owned by somebody. And an awful lot of it is owned by the kind of people who keep doing stuff like complaining about how the seed and chemical dealers are cheating them. Well, the reality is that if you own a farm, knowing soil chemistry and yield math and what you can and can't afford to do is literally your job. You should be able to figure out how to use cover crops and IPM to manage fertility and pests yourself as much as possible to save money. Because yeah, doing that stuff yourself is generally cheaper than buying your solutions from dealers. It's so funny to me how cover crops and biological pest management, these things are sold as sustainable measures that we should do because they save the planet. They're usually also cheaper. They are more financially viable for the farms. That is another reason we should do them. So the fact that we have so many farmers who ask the chemical and seed and equipment dealers how to farm and then act surprised when those dealers somehow keep winding up with all their money is crazy. We should not be acting like that's normal. We should not be acting like that's a normal hazard of agriculture. That is a hazard of being in over your head, and we should say it. Farming is just not a job for everybody, and that is okay. It's not a moral judgment. It just is what it is. Just like being an EMT or a truck driver or an actuary is not for everybody. And maybe it's a bad idea to pick farmers by the lottery of inheritance. Just like we learned, you can't pick your government by the lottery of inheritance. We got rid of hereditary rulers for a reason. But somehow we as a country decided the right way to do agriculture is do everything we can to keep heirs in business, no matter if they're good at farming or not. I know we call it saving family farms, that makes it feel really good. But as a small family farmer, I do not think my farm should last forever. If my descendants turn out to not be agriculturally gifted, I want them to find something else to do. Them trying to farm just because I did is a waste of good land. I don't want that for my legacy. So as a small family farmer, I think it is crazy that I am being forced to pay to keep other people's family farms afloat, because I don't even think my family farm should last forever. If you've got dynastic ambitions, at least have the chops to back them up. That's all I'm saying. I told you we were going to get into some feeling stuff. Americans are kind of taught from birth that family farming is the one true way to do agriculture. And I just want to point out that if we really believe that, what we believe is that people who were born into property are just kind of better than everybody else. Smarter, more real, more deserving of taxpayer support, no matter how they actually perform in the job. And I just want us to really sit with that, because that's a lot. And that is not what progressive farmers believed. Progressive farmers were overwhelmingly first-generation farmers, people who were born with very little and who believed in working their way up. So if we really want to honor what progressive farmers stood for, let's start there. Let's wrap this thing up. I started out doing this video planning to do more of a deep dive on why there were so many first-generation farmers back during the Progressive Era. Everyone thinks it was because of the Homestead Acts, and it really wasn't. Those free homesteads were in places that were so difficult to farm. Nobody really wanted to pay money for that land. That's why they're giving those plots away for free. Most homesteaders did not wind up being able to keep those plots, and so they didn't really serve as that much of a leg up for the poor. What did really help new people get in was just the way the business of farming worked at the time. From the mid-late 1800s to about 1920, there was a way for people who weren't already wealthy to work their way up into owning land. And maybe, just maybe, we can learn from that today. But putting all of this and that into one video just wound up being too long, and so I've broken it up into 2 videos, and all that info will go in the second part. What I want to say for now is, our farm policy for the last century or more has pretty much abandoned the idea that giving ordinary working class people a way to work their way up into agriculture, into farm ownership, was ever a goal. We've abandoned the idea that that was ever a thing that we should aim for. Instead, we made farm policy all about keeping the people who are already in, making sure they can't fail. And that is how agriculture became conservative. A bunch of people got in early, slammed the door shut behind them, waited for all the poor folks to trickle and dribble out, and now they're considered too important to fail. So, yeah, of course it's conservative. In today's United States, agriculture is like a walled city. If you got in back when land was cheap, congrats, you're in. So you can keep farming, or you and your heirs can sell off your land, which for most farm families has passively grown to over $1 million in wealth. No matter how well they farmed or if they even farmed at all, they can rent it out to somebody else and the land just keeps passively appreciating in value. There's a lot of parallels to the housing market here. The fact that farmland is worth so much now is great for the people who already own it. But if you're trying to buy your way in now, good luck. So your ticket to farming these days is family money or land, or just having a lot of money from a very lucrative career somewhere else, like finance or software. You know, if you got into software back when they were hiring for that. And at the same time that land was passively skyrocketing in value, agriculture also got a lot more complicated. And the qualifications to become a farmer really didn't keep up, because the main qualification to become a farmer is just wealth. Whether you inherited that wealth from family or got it from a non-farming career, that is still the main qualifier for how you become a farmer in today's United States. So I'm going to speak really carefully here. But if you've ever noticed how it feels like there's a lot of anxiety in the farm sector about how everything is just too complicated now, and it's just impossible to understand, it's really not. Agriculture is just a real job. And real jobs are like that. They have some complicated fiddly bits. And now agriculture is a real job with some complicated fiddly bits. But it's still a normal amount of complicated fiddly bits. We're not exactly trying to put a person on the moon here, okay? We're just trying to grow crops and livestock, which is a thing we know how to do. So the fact that the ownership class in agriculture feels overwhelmed by agriculture just being a real job, that is not a symptom of agriculture having become too complicated. That is a symptom of who's in charge in agriculture, who owns the land, who owns the businesses, and how they wound up calling the shots because of personal wealth, not because they had to work their way up and build and demonstrate skills to get there. And that is not how the progressive farmers of the past rolled at all. They believed that normal people who didn't have $1 million in savings should be able to farm. And I think they were right. Now, to be clear, let's not try and repeat all their tactics, because the way they were doing it only worked because they could keep stealing land from other people. And the US government, especially the one we have right now, doesn't need new ideas. What we do need is to have a real conversation about how maybe farm policy should not be about keeping heirs in business at all costs. Maybe it should be about building a ladder for ordinary people to get in, and for people who are overwhelmed to make a graceful exit and step down that is not just cashing out to development. This would keep good land farming, and it would bring in fresh blood. Both of these things are desperately needed in agriculture. Having a way for ordinary people to get into agriculture can also get the public invested in agriculture in a way that it's just not right now, because agriculture is for those people over there, a tiny little sliver of the population. And ordinary people getting in is good for agriculture. It keeps agriculture connected to the rest of our society and what other people outside agriculture really need. You know, growing what our customers actually want. That's also really good for agriculture. So the next video is going to go into depth on how there used to be a career ladder into farming 150 years ago, how it worked, how it didn't work, and how we can build on its successes and not repeat its mistakes today. I've already recorded most of that second part. It's going to go up early on Patreon, so if you want to see it, check it out. The link to Patreon is down below. Only if you have extra cash, though. If you're broke, hang on to it. It is going to come out on YouTube within the next few weeks. Anyway, if you're still watching, thanks for making it to the end. Y'all do good out there.